Happy Father's Day. I wish all the fathers who might be watching this message today a very happy day, and hope that you get spoiled and reminded that you hopefully are a good father, but also perhaps that you could be a better dad. I must say for myself, every time I get to this day, I reflect not so much on what a great father I am, but on the many ways in which I could be a much better dad to my son. So as we get to Father's Day, I must say it's been on my mind around the role of fathers in our society, and more broadly the role of men in society. We have rightly focused quite intensively for the last while on issues of race and racism. But layered into all of that is also the question of men and sexism, and particularly gender-based violence. And so men in society are partners and fathers and men and the children of somebody else. And in many ways, men have failed in their roles, in these roles in society. Our country, particularly here in South Africa, has the highest rates of rape and domestic violence in the world. And so we are really grappling with the question of what it means to be a man in our society, and the way in which men appear to have, in general of course, defined masculinity as being violent. And so we see violence by men towards women, particularly their women partners, towards their children, and also towards other men. And so we know that most people who get hurt in society are hurt by a man. Of course, there are women that abuse their children, that abuse their husbands, that abuse other people, and that kill. Of course, that is true, but it is so small compared to what we see amongst men. And we also know in this country, and this is a story that I hear from my students at the university again and again and again, is the story of the absence of fathers. That many children don't know who their fathers are. And even if they know who their fathers are, often there's very little contact. And even when they live in the same house, these fathers are often quite absent. The sexual abuse of children is profoundly disturbing. And when it is committed by a father of their own children, whether it's their biological or their stepchildren, this seems to be a particularly, I'm at a loss for words, a particularly terrible way of expressing one's fatherhood towards one's children, to abuse them sexually. I have my own experience of fathers who were under-involved. One who had left when I was young, the other who was present but not emotionally engaged. And all of this left me quite hungry and vulnerable for fathering, and made me vulnerable to exploitation by a man who was not a relative, but who set himself up as a father figure in my life and sexually exploited me when I was young. And so I really understand both the hunger for fathering and the pain of not receiving the kind of fathering that we should all be receiving. In a sense, it's because of this failure of men to provide the kind of fathering that most of us need, that having a God who is constructed and described to us as a father can be so healing and liberating. And when I was a young Christian, this for me was absolutely one of the central parts of my faith experience, was that here was a God who was involved and who loved me and who would not exploit me. I try often when I'm speaking to use gender-inclusive language when I speak about God. But in my personal, private relationship with God and my own spirituality, God is always my Father. It's important that he's my father and not just a parent, because I had a much more involved and a much more present mother. But it's really the fathering that I was hungry for. And so I would look to God to be a good father. So let me tell you about this God, this fatherly God, this godly Father of ours. Let me just tell you a few bits and pieces about who he is and what he does for us as a father. He is always listening to us and always ready to respond. He is the Father who is tuned into his children and who will respond to us whenever we call out for help. Just in my last message, I spoke about Psalm 31, where the psalmist says, "And he heard my cry. He heard my cry." And God responded immediately and reached out and grabbed the psalmist and provided him the kind of response that he needed. God is always listening. He never sleeps. His ears are always open, and he's always ready and wanting to step into our lives and provide us the kind of support that we need. This is a God who loves us to the moon and back. From dawn till dusk, he is the God who loves us so immensely and deeply and extravagantly that he sent his only Son into the world to come and journey with us. And we treated that Son so terribly by crucifying him, and yet God has forgiven us for even that. He is a God who loves us utterly and unconditionally and generously. He has super high expectations of us. So if you think that your parents are demanding and that is very and hard to please, well, God takes that to the nth degree. He really has exceptionally high expectations of us. And the truth is that none of us, not even the very best of us, live up to his expectations. But he always forgives. He has these expectations, but when we come to him and say, "I'm sorry I let you down, I didn't achieve what you aspired for me to achieve," he forgives us again and again and again. His patience never runs out. His love is unconditional. His willingness to forgive is infinite. This is the kind of Father who, when we have left him, will go into the road and stand there waiting for us. He will stand in the road and he'll be looking up the one way and down the other way and is looking for us. He will stand there for days, for months, for years. He will stand and wait and look and hope and pray and wish that we would come back to him. And when we do eventually come back, if we do eventually come back, he doesn't spend the first 2 hours chastising us and giving us the cold shoulder. He throws his arms open and he welcomes us. He wraps his arms around us and he says, "I'm so glad that you have returned." There's no incrimination. There's no chastisement. It's just a welcome back. He is delighted to have us back in his presence. This is a God who prepares meals for us. This is a Father who prepares a meal for his children. He lays a table before us that is loaded with every kind of food that you might want to have, and with drink that overflows. He is generous in feeding us and in taking on that role of being a provider and a caregiver and a nourisher. He promises to be with us always, to never leave us, to never forsake us, and to journey with us to the very, very end. Always, always with us. And so, dear friend, if you have had some negative experiences of fathering, perhaps just an absence of fathering, a bit of a negligent or lack of attention from your father, or if you have gone further down the bad kinds of experiences that we can have with fathers, and you had a father who was abusive or violent or drunk or exploitive or sexually abused you. Know that you have a Father in heaven who will never do any of those things to you, and who stands always with his arms open, ready to receive you. There is healing in having a relationship with a Father like this. In psychotherapy, we call it a corrective emotional experience. You get to experience what fatherhood is supposed to be about when you have a relationship with God, our Father. And I really wish that for you, as I wish it in an ongoing way for myself. And so as much as I say, Happy Father's Day to all the men out there, today is also a day to say, Happy Father God Day. How blessed are we to have a Father in heaven who loves us like this.